Yes. Although many of us in the diaspora are not descendants of Zulu people, we still have stepping and connection to the ground through our feet in our DNA.
Now that makes me wonder, like, are we, maybe when we traveled to the western region of Africa, maybe we weren't so far removed from our Bantu roots. Because I feel like so many of our customs in the diaspora, regardless of Brazil, Colombia, the Caribbean, is still so similar to Bantu people. So it makes me wonder, maybe before we were kidnapped and sent to the Americas, were we still attached to a lot of customs and traditions from the Bantu region before we migrated to West and Central Africa? Something to think about. What are your thoughts?
Okay, so this is my 2 cents about that based on the digging that I've done, mainly in accordance with the slave trades that happen in Africa. Now, in order to understand this, which is why I always speak about all the slave trades, you'll be able to put the pieces together as to why specific nations of Africa are alike in dress code, in body modification, in song, in nature, as well as in language. So let's take it back, right? The first slave trade was the Trans-Afro-Asian slave trade, what we know as the Silk Road. This is one of the reasons why people will say the Kwe have DNA of Asians. So you see how Australia and Asia are semi-connected through islands, right? And we all know that Australia was said to be the prison of the world after they destructed the people of Australia. Africans too, who revolted and were captured, were sent as prisoners of war to Australia. Keep in mind that we all had one wish: to go home. So after some time, those in Australia would travel into Asia and make their way back to Africa. Those in Asia would take the Silk Road back into Africa. And these are the specific reasons how the DNA gets left behind, right? Then there was the Arab-Islam slave trade, which has obviously never ended, as we still have the Libyan slave trade, right now in 2022. But during this slave trade, many Africans were taken from Africa into the Middle East. Some obviously managed to make their way back into Africa, which is how many Middle Easterns have African DNA, as we all know the breeding farms. This is where the confusion comes, where people want to claim that we're all from Africa, but they don't want to speak about the fact that slavery didn't only exist in Africa or the Americas, it also existed in Asia, Australia, as well as the Middle East and Europe, of stolen Africans. Then we go to the Indian Ocean slave trade, where Africans were taken to India, which is how we have the Sidi people, who within their songs speak about being stolen from the east coast of Africa, because the Indian Ocean slave trade intertwined with the Arab slave trade. And again, many were able to come back into Africa. Some also came back because when the Europeans invaded these specific continents too, they would also take these descendants of Africans who were slaves and bring them back into Africa, which is why people from Madagascar or Mauritius have an Arab Indian-like look. And now we understand that the mixing did not only happen in Africa, but it also happened within these continents. And that's why there's this weird claim that everyone's from Africa, which isn't true. Because if we do that, we ignore the destruction and infiltration of our people and the acts of the POCs who participated in our destruction prior to the Europeans. The reason why I'm mentioning these slave trades first, because when infiltration was happening by the POC, many Africans within the East Coast and the North were running into the West, to Central, down to southern. This is where that Bantu migration myth comes from, because they want us to believe that the Bantu were just migrating to the south. We're all Bantu. We are all Kwe. We are all the same people of the motherland. We all existed within the motherland. So those who were running during these specific slave trades were looking for safety and running into the west and then down into central and then into south. So this doesn't mean that there were no Bantu within the south. A Bantu who received a Bantu who were seeking and running away from the infiltration of the north and the east, as well as the west and central. Like for instance, those who ran into the southeastern part of Africa, like for instance, those who ran into southeast, like Mozambique, Musa bin Bik, which is actually named after a wealthy Arab slave trader. They had no idea that the East Coast Arab slave trade had traveled down into the southern east coast of Africa. Now, before we go any further, we need to understand that Mozambique and South Africa are neighboring countries, as well as Zimbabwe. Delagoa Bay was where the slave trading was happening. There were no borders at this time. At the time, people were not able to understand that Delagoa Bay and KwaZulu-Natal were two different places, because they're right next to each other. Now we fast forward into the transatlantic slave trade of the Europeans, right? Now because of their conflict with the Arabs, because even though they partnered up to fight the Moors out of Europe, it's not like they liked each other. It was a beneficial contract at the time. This is why we don't hear about the Europeans going into the northern part of Africa. We hear that they came in from the west as well as the south. And when I say south, I say southwest and southeast. Now keep in mind, when the transatlantic slave trade is happening and they're infiltrating the west as well as the south, what are people doing? They're running. Some are running back into Central Africa, some are running west, some are running east, and some from the west are running back central and running south. And obviously they're not aware that when they're running west or running central, that the transatlantic slave trade infiltration is also happening within the west and the central. And those that are running from the west don't know that they're also infiltrating the south. Now let's take it back to Mozambique, right? Most kidnapped Africans who were taken from Mozambique, Delagoa Bay, KwaZulu-Natal, were shipped to the Caribbean and South America. Those who were taken from the southwest in and around Angola are being taken to the south of the United States. Keep in mind that it's not a coincidence that there's a prison called Angola in the south of the United States. All of these people are Southern Bantu people. So yes, not only do AAs have Western African DNA, y'all have Sub-Saharan DNA, which includes Southern African DNA. Which is why I say you are all Bantu, because not only would you have the Zulu people's DNA, you also have Swati, you have Namibian, you have Angolan, you have Botswana, you have Malawian, you have Zimbabwean, due to the southwestern infiltration as well as the southeastern infiltration. Even though entire families were stolen, there are many who were split. Remember, women were married into other families and have their descendants throughout Southern Africa, as well as Central, as well as West, as well as East. Many Africans who were stolen because of the running and the escaping and the revolts that our ancestors partook, many watched their families go. Many watched their families stay behind. And that is why they took away your surnames, your last names, because they broke up families, not tribes, but clans. And we know this because of our family totems. Our family totems tell a story. Our family totems are compasses to lead us back home. This is how Nguni, Ngoni, Bakone, Vangona are able to find each other within each other, because family totems don't lie. And this is why the father's last name ended up becoming a benefit, because of plural families, polygamist families, where all the children of the multiple wives of a certain king or a certain man were able to find each other. And in the case where there was a queendom, like the Balubedu people, the Mujaji rain queens, it would be the mother's last name, because it would be the other way around. And this is why I've actually been speaking about the Mfekane wars. Like I've said already, there's no such thing as Mfekane or Difakane. It comes from Felekaya, because of the depopulation that happened in Southern Africa, as well as the slave raids and the revolts by our people, as well as the running and escaping. This is why Soshangane, it's not that Ushie Ingane Zake, it's because he was separated from his children, his descendants. due to the infiltration of the invaders. They came left, right, and center. But what easier way to spin the story around? But what easier way than to spin the story around and to make us look like we were savage, self-hating black people who destructed each other, fabricating the story of Shaka Zulu to make the Zulu look incompetent and monsters to the rest of their own people, when all clans were fortresses of kingdoms, unshaken fighters, willing to put their lives on the line for their people, to not be stolen, to not be unalived. And the easiest way to do this was to depopulate the Bantu, to scare others, to not put up a fight. This is why I say the concept of saying that we sold each other out, we make excuse for the infiltration and the invasion of our ancestors. We ignore that what they did created this malfunctioning of people choosing to save their families and selling other clans out. Because people felt like, I've already lost so much. I refuse to lose what I have left. This malfunctioning gave birth to self-hate and no longer looking at other clans as your people, but as a way to protect your family. And that's how xenophobia was born, because we adapted the nature of our oppressors. Not only did we become like them, we surpassed them. And when they watch us, oh, what a fucking sight. They're minions doing exactly what they taught them to do, and doing it so much better that they don't even have to do it anymore, because we do it ourselves. So yeah, it's a sad, sad case scenario.